The Lagos sun was unforgiving that morning, harsh and relentless, as if it too had an opinion. Heat pressed against zinc roofs and cracked pavements, while the city moved with its usual impatience horns, blaring. Hawkers shouting prices, buses coughing black smoke into the air. Chioma adjusted her daughter's school bag, tightening the straps with practiced care. The little girl's fingers curled around hers, holding on the way children do when they sense danger without fully understanding it. Before they even reached the school gate, Chioma felt it. Lagos had many languages, and Judgement spoke without sound. Mothers stood in small groups, wrappers neatly tied, phones in hand, voices low but sharp. Respectable smiles faded as Chioma approached. "There she goes," someone muttered, not bothering to lower her voice enough. "Single mother," another replied. "No shame these days. It's the child I pity," a third added. "A home without a father always shows." Chioma's chest tightened, but her face remained calm. She had learned long ago that reacting fed the fire. She bent slightly toward her daughter, smoothing her uniform. "Walk straight," she whispered. "Head up." The words came from memory, her grandmother's voice, steady and wise. The tortoise does not announce itself, yet it reaches its destination. Silence can be armor. At the gate, the security man avoided her eyes. A teacher offered a stiff nod. Inside the compound, children stared openly. Some whispered. Others pointed. A boy laughed until another hushed him. Chioma felt the sting settle deeper, not because of herself, but because it was reaching her child now. Flashbacks slipped in without warning. Years ago, Chioma had walked this same road differently, hopeful. In love, certain. Kunnel had spoken of marriage with confidence, not urgency. "There is time," he always said. Time vanished, the day responsibility arrived. When pregnancy replaced romance, his voice softened, then faded, then disappeared completely. Back in the present, Chioma knelt to her daughter's level. "School is a place for learning," she said gently. "Not for shame. Do you understand?" Her daughter nodded, though her eyes held questions too heavy for her age. Inside the classroom, Chioma watched her take a seat. The teacher cleared her throat and began lessons as if nothing unusual hovered in the air. Chioma stayed behind briefly, explaining in calm, careful words that her daughter deserved dignity, not assumptions. The teacher listened, eyes kind but cautious. Support here came quietly, afraid of being noticed. Outside again, Lagos swallowed Chioma whole. The market roared. Life continued. Judgement did not pause for fairness. As they walked home later, her daughter finally asked the question Chioma had been bracing for. "Mama, why did they talk about us?" Chioma stopped. She crouched, meeting her daughter's gaze fully. "Because some people fear what they don't understand," she said. "And others protect their own mistakes by pointing at someone else." The girl nodded slowly. Around them, the city breathed, different, loud, alive. What Lagos didn't know was this. Chioma carried more than groceries and responsibilities. She carried a truth buried under years of silence. And one day, that truth would force the same mouths that judged her to explain themselves. For now. She walked on, quiet, upright, unbroken. Life after that morning settled into a pattern Chioma knew to well: wake early, move fast, endure quietly. Lagos never slowed for sympathy. The city rewarded strength and punished hesitation. Every day felt like standing in the middle of traffic, hoping drivers would swerve. By afternoon, Chioma was back at the tailoring shop in Mushin, the small space filled with the smell of fabric dye and sweat. Sewing machines hummed like tired insects. She focused on her stitches, letting precision drown out noise. Work was the only place Judgement sometimes forgot her name, but gossip always found a way. Two women near the doorway paused their conversation when Chioma approached. Their eyes flicked to her stomach, her ringless hand, then away. Respect in Lagos came with conditions. Marriage was one of them. Later, Madame Kemi called her aside. The woman's voice was gentle, but her words were not. "Chioma, you know I value you," she began. "But some customers have complained. They say your presence sends the wrong message. People talk. Business is fragile." Chioma understood immediately. She nodded once. "I'll clear my table," she said. There was no argument, no pleading. She packed her scissors, folded her measuring tape, and stepped out into the street with dignity intact, but income gone. Losing a job hurt, but losing it without wrongdoing cut deeper. That evening, power flickered in their one-room apartment. Amara slept curled beside her school books. Chioma sat on the floor, counting money under a dim bulb. Rent, school fees, food. Each number was a reminder that morality speeches never paid bills. Exhaustion finally broke through her discipline. Tears came, silent and sharp. She wiped them quickly. Crying was allowed, but not surrender. Flashback arrived like an old wound reopening. Connell had once admired her strength. You think ahead, he'd said. He trusted her with documents, errands, meetings she barely understood. At the time, she thought it was love. Now, she saw it was convenience. When pregnancy demanded accountability, his trust vanished with his promises. Yet something lingered, files saved on an old flash drive. Emails she never deleted, transactions she never questioned. The next morning, Chioma visited Auntie Bose, the elderly woman who sold akara by the roadside. Bose listened without interrupting, eyes clouded with age but sharp with truth. In this country, Bose said slowly, they punish the woman first. Even when the man is hiding, Chioma sighed. I only want peace for my child. Bose leaned closer. Peace built on lies collapses. Truth waits. It always waits. Those words followed Chioma all week. On Friday evening, she met Ifany at a roadside cafe. He had been her friend in university, now an investigative journalist. She didn't explain everything. She didn't need to. If someone had evidence, she asked carefully, evidence that could ruin powerful people, what would you say? Ifany studied her face. I'd ask why they stayed quiet. Chioma answered honestly, because silence was safer. And now? She looked at her phone, Amara's smiling school photo glowing on the screen. Now silence is expensive. That night, rain washed Lagos streets. Chioma opened the old folder again. This time she didn't look away. The truth inside it was heavier than Judgement hand, far more dangerous. Rain had left the streets shiny, reflective pools forming where potholes caught the water. Lagos looked different in the evening, softer somehow, but no less judgmental. Chioma walked briskly, Amara beside her, umbrella shielding both from the lingering drizzle. But Chioma's mind was elsewhere, tangled in the folder she had reopened the night before. Names, numbers, timelines, all whispered secrets she had never understood fully until now. Connell's name stared at her from a series of scanned documents. Transfers, contracts, receipts, all connected. The man who had abandoned her, who had smiled and promised, was now a rising politician backed by wealth that had no visible origin. And she had proof of how much of that wealth was tied to deception and to her silence. Chioma didn't know where to start, but she knew she had to. The neighborhood, with its endless gaze and ready judgment, would not see her struggle for what it really was. They would see only her as a single mother, a cautionary tale, a character in a moral lecture. And she was done being their story. She met Ifany again, this time at a small cafe tucked into a quieter part of Cirilla. The smell of roasted plantains and akara filled the air, grounding her. She pushed the folder across the table. These are all linked to Connell and his family, she said quietly. I need to know if exposing this will reach people who can do something. Ifany leaned back, studying her. Chioma, this isn't just a story. It's a storm waiting to happen. Are you ready for what comes after? Chioma's gaze did not waver. I'm ready for my daughter to grow up in a world where lies don't protect the powerful and punish the innocent. The journalist nodded slowly. Then we start carefully. Flashback intruded again, this time sharper and crueler. She remembered the night Connell left, the door clicking shut, the silence that followed, louder than words. He had promised to return, promised marriage, promised support, and she had believed. Believed in love, in fairness, in his words. That night, she had wept on the floor of their shared apartment, feeling betrayal sink in as deeply as the concrete beneath her knees. Back in the present, Chioma walked home under streetlights that reflected puddles like fractured mirrors. Each step was a reminder. Lagos was alive, watching, judging, but also listening. Every whisper she had endured now felt like fuel. Anger mixed with determination, a dangerous combination. At home, she sat Amara down. "Mama may have to do something big," she said, careful with her words. "It might be scary, but it's to make sure no one else suffers like we did." Amara's young face frowned in understanding. "Will it hurt people?" "Sometimes truth hurts," Chioma admitted. "But hiding it hurts more." That night, sleep was brief. Chioma reviewed the documents again. Patterns emerge: fraud, political maneuvering, lies covering personal gain. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from clarity. Every piece of evidence told her one thing: society's judgment had a hidden ally. And that ally was Connell and the family he represented. And yet society still saw only her, the mother without a husband, struggling alone. The irony wasn't lost on her. Somewhere, far away, Connell laughed at some meeting, unaware that the woman he discarded was quietly building a storm capable of shaking everything he had worked for. Chioma smiled faintly. The game had begun, and Lagos would have to watch. The next morning, Lagos woke to the usual chaos horns blaring, motorbikes weaving, market cries slicing through the thick air. But for Chioma, the world had changed. She no longer moved simply to survive. She moved with intent. Every step toward the market, every bus ride, every transaction was measured, calculated. The folder with Connell's secrets remained locked in her drawer. But her mind replayed its contents like a heartbeat, steady and unrelenting. At the market, whispers continued, but Chioma no longer flinched. She had grown used to the sting, yet this time, the whispers fueled something else: strategy. She smiled politely at the ladies in head wraps, returned greetings, but her eyes scanned the crowd. Every conversation, every sideways glance, every judgmental word was now intelligence. Lagos had always been a battlefield of appearances. Now she knew where to strike. Chioma's friend, Auntie Bose, called her over near the Akara stand. "Child," she said, voice hushed but firm, "they are ready to write your story for you. Don't let them. Timing matters. Watch and wait." Chioma nodded, absorbing the old woman's wisdom. Patience was her ally. Anger might cloud judgment. Strategy demanded calm. Later that afternoon, she met Ifenye again. He had begun organizing a preliminary report, carefully cross-checking transactions, timelines, and communications. "Chioma," he said, leaning forward, "this isn't just gossip anymore. We're looking at embezzlement, fraud, and manipulation on a scale that can topple careers. But it's dangerous. Are you ready for the fallout?" Chioma's hand tightened around her coffee cup. "I'm ready. I've survived judgment my whole life. I can survive exposure too." The journalist nodded but added a warning. "Once this goes public, society's attention will pivot. They won't see the truth at first. They'll see youth a single mother as the headline. You need allies." Chioma smiled faintly, thinking of the few allies she already had: the teacher who had defended her daughter, Auntie Bose, Ifenye. Their quiet support felt like an invisible shield. As night fell, Chioma returned home to Amara. The girl sensed the tension, the electric anticipation in her mother's every move. "Mama," she said softly, "are we going to fight them?" Chioma kneeled to her daughter's level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We are not fighting blindly," she said. "We are showing them truth, even if it hurts pride, even if it scares people. But always remember, our courage is our power." That night, Chioma prepared. She printed copies of key documents, organized evidence chronologically, and rehearsed conversations she would have to navigate. Every detail mattered. Every word could shift perception, sway opinion, or destroy credibility. Outside, Lagos slept restlessly. But within Chioma's small room, a storm was forming, silent, calculated, unstoppable. Society had judged her for years, called her weak, a cautionary tale, a burden. But the tide was turning. Judgment would now meet accountability. and somewhere in the city, Connell rested unaware. Confident in his reputation, blind to the reckoning quietly assembling in the hands of the woman he had abandoned, Chioma allowed herself a brief smile. The storm wasn't just coming, it was already here. And when it struck, no amount of wealth, power, or societal influence could shield the guilty. The morning air in Lagos felt heavier than usual, as if the city itself sensed the change. Chioma stepped out with her folder tucked safely under her arm, determination in every stride. Today was the day she would no longer be judged silently. Today, she would turn the tables. Her first stop was Connell's office, a sleek glass building in Victoria Island. Security guards barely flinched as she approached. They knew her as just another mother with questions. Not as the woman carrying evidence that could dismantle an empire. But Chioma didn't need them to see her. She only needed to reach the right ears. She handed Ifenya a USB discreetly at the entrance. "Everything you need," she whispered. Chronological, organized, airtight. The journalist nodded, eyes wide with respect and caution. "This is explosive. Once it's out, there's no going back." Chioma simply smiled. For years, society had branded her powerless. For years, whispers had followed her like shadows. Today, she would show them the truth of strength forged in silence. She returned home briefly, finding Amara playing quietly with her dolls. The child looked up, sensing the tension, the anticipation in her mother's every movement. "Mama?" she asked. "Will it change things?" "Yes, baby," Chioma replied, brushing her daughter's hair back. "People will see things they ignored, and they will have to face it." By late afternoon, IFNE's article was live. Headlines screamed. Lagos political heir accused. Evidence of fraud and abandonment revealed by former partner. Social media exploded. Comments flooded in some defending Connell, others expressing shock, disbelief, and outrage. Chioma watched silently, feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. Her phone rang. It was Connell. "Chioma. What is this?" he demanded, voice tight with anger and fear. "I told you once," she said calmly. "Silence has a price. You chose to abandon me and our child. Now the world sees your truth." The conversation ended abruptly, and Chioma exhaled. The man who had once defined her suffering was now reacting to consequences, powerless against evidence. Word of the scandal reached the market, the school, even the church. Mothers who had whispered and pointed no longer looked at her with judgment. They avoided her gaze, unsure how to respond. Chief Adaimi, Connell's father, stormed into the press office, attempting to control damage. But the documents spoke louder than words, exposing not only Connell's misdeeds, but systemic hypocrisy. That evening, Chioma walked Amara home slowly. She felt lighter, freer. Society had judged her, tried to define her worth, and failed. For the first time in years, Chioma felt validation, not from applause, not from recognition, but from the truth she carried finally finding its place. And then came the twist. Auntie Bose, who had always spoken in riddles and proverbs, approached Chioma quietly. "Child, you did well," she said softly. "But remember, the river doesn't just break rocks. It shapes them. And now the village is watching not only you, but also those who tried to drown your spirit. Some will rise, some will fall, but all will remember your courage." Chioma looked at her daughter, who smiled faintly, understanding more than a child should. She knew society's judgment had not disappeared. It had shifted. And the weight of silence that once threatened to crush her was now a weapon she had wielded with precision. The storm had come, and it had changed everything. The days that followed felt surreal. Lagos, a city that once watched Chioma with judgmental eyes, now buzzed with stories of the woman who dared to defy power in silence. News channels replayed Ifeani's investigative report, social media debated, politicians whispered, the market echoed with gossip, some praising her courage, others begrudging it. But Chioma walked through it all with a quiet strength she had only recently discovered. At home, she sat with Amara under the dim glow of their lamp. The girl's school books lay open, untouched, but her eyes were bright, alive with curiosity and wonder. "Mama," she said, her small voice tinged with awe, "they're talking about you everywhere." Chioma smiled, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Yes, baby. But remember, it's not about being famous. It's about being truthful. Courage is louder than whispers." Flashbacks of years of struggle flooded her mind, the ridicule at school gates, the sidelong glances from neighbors, the empty promises from Cannell, but none of it seemed heavy now. All of it had led to this moment, a revelation that reshaped her life and the life of her daughter. She had turned judgment into justice, shame into strategy, and silence into a weapon of truth. The unexpected twist came from an unlikely source. Chief Adayami. Cannell's father appeared at her doorstep the following morning, visibly shaken. His polished shoes and stern expression could not hide the humility in his eyes. "Chioma," he began, voice low, "I underestimated you. You were stronger than I thought, and braver. My family owes you apologies and accountability." Chioma studied him quietly, feeling the weight of years lift slowly. "The past is written," she said softly, "but the future, we shape it." Even Connell reached out eventually. But this time, there were no empty promises. Only acknowledgement, shame, and an understanding that actions have consequences. Chioma listened, then let the moment pass. She had no need for reconciliation. Her path now was about building a life untethered by betrayal or judgment. Word spread through the community. And slowly, the mothers at school gates approached her not with ridicule, but with tentative respect. Some sought advice. Others apologized quietly. Lagos had shifted, however slightly, in the wake of her courage. She had changed not just her own story, the lens through which society measured single mothers. Chioma and Amara walked the streets with heads held high. The markets, the school gates, the bustling bus stops, none could touch the fortress of resilience and love they had built together. Years of whispered judgments now felt like echoes of a distant storm that had passed in her heart. Chioma knew this. Courage is not always loud, but it is always seen. Judgment cannot thrive where truth is wielded with patience and precision. And a mother's love, fierce and unyielding, can carve paths through stone and water alike. As night fell over Lagos, lights shimmering across the streets and rivers, Chioma sat by the window, Amara asleep in her arms, and finally allowed herself to breathe. The city's judgment had lost its grip. The storm had passed, leaving only clarity, pride, and a legacy of strength for the next generation. Chioma smiled, whispering softly, "We have survived, and we will thrive."